I am Connie Merriman, and my research project was on beavers in the Cache River Wetlands. Very exciting stuff. Alright, this is a picture that I took back in January or February when we had like a normal amount of rainfall. I wanted to show you this picture because this is a creek. This is actually in the upper Cache. It's called Cache Creek, not too far from my house in Union County. And if you look at the water level over here, this is where the Beaver Dam is, and this is probably 3 to 4 feet lower. You can't really see, but right in here is how much lower the water level is, and that's what I expected to find when I was doing my research. And there were several factors that affected that, and that didn't really happen, but I'll talk about that later. So my question was, how do beavers in the Cache River Wetland affect the riparian zone, which is the area around the creek, and the hydrology or the water levels? These are some things that beavers do. They cut large trees, and that reduces the amount of canopy cover, of course, and the loss of canopy cover then allows for more growth of the ground cover. Beavers dam waterways affecting the water levels of streams. So I expected to find fewer large trees where the beavers were present and more ground cover. That was what was supposed to happen. So I wanted to know how many seedlings, which are 3 inches tall, saplings, which are like knee length, and large trees are present near an area of beaver activity compared to an area not affected by beavers. How much ground cover and canopy cover is present where beavers reside compared to where there are no beavers, and how severely is the water level changed by beaver activity. My hypothesis was that the number of large trees around a beaver dam will be significantly less than the number of large trees around an area with no beaver activity. The ground cover and canopy cover will be significantly different. They should be correlated. The more canopy cover you have, the less ground cover you should have. And the less canopy cover you have, the more ground cover you will have. The water level upstream of a beaver dam will be significantly higher than the water level downstream of a beaver dam. All right, and if I could have done this several times over several different locations, I think that my hypothesis, would have borne out. But we chose Section 8 just because the people at SIU knew that there were beaver dams there. But it was difficult because it's a reserve, so there's no trapping or hunting or anything. So there are beavers everywhere. So it was very difficult to compare this to an area where there were no beavers because there were so many. So we chose 5 locations with visible beaver activity. So there was an active dam, or at least it had been active in the last year or so. And then we tried to go farther downstream and find 5 locations with no visible activity, which, like I said, that kind of didn't work out just real well because there were so many beavers in there. And so I mentioned to Shelby, my advisor, going somewhere else to find an area that was not affected by beavers, and she said that would skew the results because then we were getting into a totally different area than what we would be comparing 2 different areas. So we didn't do that. But we chose 5 locations, and we did we measured 10 meters from the riverbank, and we measured out a 2-meter square close to the bank, and then a 2-meter square 10 meters away from the bank. And we counted seedlings and saplings and trees, and Miss Lori was so kind to dig through all the poison ivy and help us. And I think she fell in, I don't know how many times.
2 out of 3 days.
But she was a trooper. She was out there with us, nasty, and all that stuff. So we measured those, and then we would go to the other side of the stream and measure on the other side of the beaver dam as well. And that works okay as long as you have a beaver dam to walk across to get across the stream. When you go to measure where there is no beaver dam, you had to find your own way across the stream. That's where we had problems. But then we measured the amount of ground cover and canopy cover at all locations, and we measured the water levels at all locations. All right, and this is me just before water went over my boots, and just before I dropped this lovely roll of tape measure into this nasty, murky water, and I tried getting out with a stick, and that didn't work, and I just lost it. I could not function at all. And poor Lori and Shelby, they're like, we'll get it. And I've already told some people, but I turned around to get back out of there, and there's this huge spider beside me in the water, and I just couldn't do it. I just could not do it. And I tried to walk back up, because they both successfully got across, of course. I tried to come back up the bank and cross at another site, and when I got over there, I got into this mud that would come up to your knees, and I have hip boots on, and I was pulling my legs, and the boots were staying, and I thought, I'm going to die out here by myself in this swamp, and nobody's going to know where I am or what happened to me. But anyway, I made it. It was all right. So anyway, it was an experience I really don't want to do any future studies on. I really have no desire for that. This is Shelby in the center. She was a trooper as well. And we are counting seedlings and saplings. And then on the last day, when we were at a no beaver dam site, I did manage to cross the log with my hip boots on and make it all the way across. And it is much worse than the picture that Lori took, I hate to tell you, but it was not good because I'm not coordinated. I barely walk on the ground without tripping. I did make it across that time. I think Lori even fell in again that day too, didn't you? I'm pretty sure she did. This is Shelby crossing where I got stuck back here. She went on across. She was so good. She had a wonderful attitude, and we can do this, and she was just kind of my little cheerleader. And this I just put in here because I wanted you to be impressed that I used this term, spherical densiometer. That's the only reason it's in there. This is just a simple little tool, and this has a little mirror hollowed out in there with a grid on there. And you can see what you do is kind of hold it up like this, and you can see little spots of sunlight right there, and right there, and right there. And you had to pretend that there were dots in these circles, and you would count how many little dots of sunlight that you saw, and that was how you measured your canopy cover. And then she had a formula when we got back that we would calculate, and it would tell you what percent of canopy cover was. So that was kind of neat that I learned how to use that. This is a castor pile. This is the beaver dam is behind me. A castor pile is where a beaver will pile up mud, and then they will drop droppings on it, castor droppings, to let the other guys know this is my turf, don't come here. It was kind of interesting to find one of those. And then this is the part that was kind of surprising, the number of seedlings and saplings close to the dam and then far from the dam. Again, we measured 2 times at the bank and 10 meters away. And the number of mature trees was just basically non-existent in both the used and the unused sites, which I think if you were in a different area, I think your results would be much different, because part of the problem with the restoration is the beavers, once you get those lovely trees planted and growing, the beavers come and cut them down. So that kind of counteracts the restoration as far as the hardwood forests are concerned. But then you have beaver, people who sympathize with the beaver too. So I guess there's kind of a balance. But the ground cover and the saplings were not significantly different, and neither were the mature trees, which we did not expect. Our canopy cover in a used site, our canopy cover should have been much less, but again, we didn't find a lot of trees. Our unused site, the canopy cover should have been more, and then the ground cover in our used site should have been a lot more. You know, it just, like I said, because of the circumstances, you would have to do this experiment several times, I think, to get accurate data. And it did the water level above a dam was about 13 centimeters, which everything is really low right now. And below it was about 9, which, like I showed you on one of those first slides, it should have been quite a bit, at least a meter different between a dammed site and below the dam. And then in the unused site, the water level should have been somewhere in between those two, and it was not as well. But there were some issues with that, and I'll explain that in just a few minutes. All right, so my conclusion is, from my experience, there was no significant difference in the number of seedlings, saplings, and large trees between the two sites, which was not expected. There was no significant difference in the amount of ground cover and canopy cover, and the water level was affected, so that one did turn out. And here are the issues that I was telling you about. It was difficult to determine if the sampling was far enough away from beaver activity, because it's a preserve. Like I said, they don't kill any of them or do anything to them, so there was a lot of beaver activity, even in streams that were parallel with the one we were in. There was beaver activity over there as well. There was a lot of swamp litter, and what I mean by that is there were a lot of tree limbs and debris in the stream, and we had a weight on our tape measure, but when you would put it down, you didn't know, because it's so murky and dirty, you didn't know if it was on the bottom of the stream or if it had gotten caught on a snag or something else. And I wasn't putting my hand under there to put it on the bottom. So I think that affected my water levels quite a bit. Also, another thing that affected my ground cover and my canopy cover was last year there was a flood. This is a swamp, so it stayed flooded most of the time last year. So I think that affected a lot of my ground cover and canopy cover. And this year there's a drought, which also affected my vegetation results. So there were a lot of issues with beavers. All right, and a special thanks to, you can't see the pictures very well, but this is Shelby measuring the water level of this creek, and this is Lori. I think this was before she fell in.
No, that's after.
One of the numerous times. But bless her heart, somebody got that data for me and fished that silly tape measure out of that creek that I could not.